Okay, the appointed time has arrived. It's 5:15. I will call this meeting of the Economic Development Committee to order for Tuesday, December 1. The record will show at this point that 2 members are in chambers, 2 members are on WebEx, and our 5th member, I'm not quite sure where Becky might be, attending, if she'll be attending tonight. I thought I would just give a minute for maybe to see if she signs on or walks in. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started with the agenda. First item of which is approval of the minutes from our meeting of the 4th of November of this year. Do I have a motion to approve, please? I have a motion from Killian. Do I have a second? I would need a second from somebody on WebEx.
I was going to make an amendment too, Mr. Chair.
Sure. Alder Watson or Alder Rasmussen, do I have a second? Oh, okay. Alder Rasmussen and Alder Watson, I guess you weren't on our audio there for a moment. Can you hear me now?
Okay.
Okay,
Can you
good.
hear me, Tom?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. And let's the record show that Alder McElhenney is now on WebEx as well. So we have all in attendance. Thank you. We have had a motion from Alder Killian to approve the minutes from our 11-4 meeting. Do I have a second? I would need a second from somebody on WebEx.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a second from Alder McElhenney. Thank you. Alder Killian?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There was just one part of the minutes. It's on page 3. After the paragraph, Grote said she researched. Following that paragraph, and this took place at about shortly after 59 minutes in the meeting, I'd like to add, if possible, about Ms. Grote stating that basically in other past development agreements, she takes the tax bill, does simple multiplication, and then sends them a check. Great Lakes Cheese and Mark McDonald's company, Mac and Don, are provided as examples. That was in response to an inquiry I made during that meeting.
Okay, so, could you please show me exactly which paragraph you're talking about? What's the first word in the paragraph?
The first word is Grote. It's on page 3 of the packet.
Oh, okay, not page 3 of the minutes.
No.
Okay. Grote explained?
Grote said.
Okay, Grote said. She
And
researched.
it's on page 2 of the minutes, if that helps.
Okay, thank
yes.
you, I got you. Grote said she researched the 2018 tax bill for the mall property and identified $274,000 for the main facility itself, a $53,000 tax bill for the J.C. Penney property, and no tax bill for the Sears property because the city owned it during that year. Grote also noted that those tax bills did not include any assessment for land value because the city had owned the land on which the mall was constructed. And what is your requested change?
Sure, my request would be an addition after that paragraph where it's, Ms. Grote stated, in other past development agreements, she takes the tax bill, does simple multiplication, and then sends them a check. And she uses Great Lakes Cheese and Mac and Don as examples.
Okay. Yes, Mayor.
I just, these minutes are a lot more, at least in general in council, are a lot more detailed than what we've ever used on the county side. So I'm just throwing it out there. Sometimes we use these as a script when maybe that's not the purpose. So it seems to be that we're a lot more descriptive here. So I just wanted to let you know that maybe in general, we're a little bit more robust on minutes than is typical. So I don't,
Sure.
I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, of course, it's not a transcript, and quite often we see, comments, in minutes, as you say, and there was discussion about, fill in the blank. But I would request that the section that's being referred to by Alder Killian, if clerk could look at what's on the video and insert those, 2 sentences or whatever.
Sure.
For archiving purposes, I would appreciate that. Okay, that being said, any other comments on the minutes? Seeing none, okay, I would take roll call vote on this. Rasmussen?
Aye.
McElhenney? That was an aye. Watson?
Aye.
Okay, Killian?
Aye.
And I say aye. Thank you. Let me go back to my agenda. Item number 2, discussion and possible action on the extension on the deferral of interest and principal payments on city-funded loans and ground leases for small businesses during the COVID-19 pandemic. Sean, do you have something for us on that?
Just going to step down here. This is the deferral on city loans and leases that the council had authorized back in March of this year following kind of the outbreak of the pandemic. At the time, there was some discussion about the loan deferrals and lease deferrals just being either an open period that could close at the discretion of staff, or if it should have a limited term to it. And ultimately, the council had voted on a measure that extended these for 6 months and then asked that the measure be brought back to the committee and then council for evaluation after that 6-month period had ended. A lot of these deferrals had wrapped up at the end of November, and there's still a need out there from a few of the businesses. Community development manager Tammy Strotz, who was administering this program, had done a survey of all the businesses that there was 11 businesses that had received a deferral, and 7 of them have resumed making payments. There were 4 that had asked to have a continuance of the deferral program. And so we're bringing this back to the Economic Development Committee meeting this evening, asking one, for a continuance of the deferral, and then also, I guess we're asking if you'd consider allowing staff to make any modifications to either extend these down the road or leave it open on a case-by-case basis going forward. I believe Finance Director Marianne Grote is with us as well this evening, if you have any questions of her.
Okay, before discussion, could I have a motion to approve, please? I have a motion from Rasmussen. I have a second from Killian. Thank you. Alder Rasmussen?
Thank you. I agree with extending these. Obviously, the pandemic isn't going anywhere anytime soon. I did read in the packet, though, that there was interest in perhaps extending it for an indefinite period of time and then allowing staff to work with the individual businesses on a case-by-case basis to decide when they might be able to resume payments. I agree completely with letting the staff interact with businesses because they may be at a different operational state depending on what they do and what businesses they are. But I do think the committee should keep at least one eye on this process to make sure that the extension period in general is not too long. So I think not that we would be required to come back to the committee again for approval per se, but I think that we should have a report in the committee on at least 6 months out, May 1st, who has resumed payments and who has not, just so that we know kind of where we're at with the extensions.
Okay, pretty much my thoughts were along those lines as well. It just seems to me that, from business to business, their situation and what they're trying to do to, pull out of things is going to be different, for every one of them. So I don't think a cookie cutter approach would be useful. I mean, everybody's, trying to, ramp up or get back to full or whatever. So it'd be good to have ongoing discussions with the businesses and I'm sorry, but there might be somebody on WebEx with a microphone not muted or whatever, and we're getting a lot of noise coming in. So, okay, seems to have stopped. Yeah, so that staff can, on an ongoing way, just keep an eye on, keep discussing, with the businesses where they're at, how is it going, and, evaluate them on that case-by-case basis. I think it's a good idea that you brought up. Anything else from the committee? Mr. Miller has raised his hand.
Going along, I guess, with the original recommendation the first time that this was, I guess, considered, I like the idea of having a 6-month time period and we revisit this. The indeterminate amount of time kind of scares me. I think that also scared Anne back when she also said we should put it at 6 months and then revisit. So that kind of goes along, I think, with what Lisa was saying. But other than that, that's all I have to say.
Thank you. There's nothing wrong with that. As a matter of fact, even within that 6-month time period, we can still have the ongoing discussions, as Alder Rasmussen brought up. And, some people might not need that full 6 months, and I just think, we need to keep an eye on it, just in the interim, and then revisit it at that end date and reevaluate. So, very good. Anything else from the committee or other guests? Nope, I'm seeing shaking heads out there. Very good. I would then go ahead and take roll call vote once again. Watson?
Aye.
McElhenney?
Aye.
Rasmussen?
Aye.
Killian?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Thank you.
And just for clarification,
Get on your mic.
I'm sorry, for clarification, you're just looking for an update at 6 months, or you would like, you'd like staff to bring this back up for?
It would have to be, subject to, I guess, approval for extension again at that time.
Okay, all right.
Thank you. Item number 3, discussion on street layout options for the former Great Lakes Cheese property in the North Riverfront area. And, bear in mind that this is a street issue, beyond being part of an ED issue. So this would not end here, but CISM would also have to take a crack at this. And Brad, are you going to give us a?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, here. I think you're over.
All right, thank you. It was on earlier. If someone turned me off, so. That was you, Mayor? Shame on you. All right, thanks, everyone. I guess, like Tom said, this is sort of a CISM issue, but in this case, it is tied in with ED. Since we did receive, when we first put this out, we did receive 3 different proposals. We're sort of down to just 1 now, but the street design is tied into the economic development of this area, and I think it's a good thing to talk about at this committee. And of course, final decisions will be made at CISM, but depending on our discussion here today, that might help inform some of their decisions. So I did put together some slides, just some visual aids, kind of summarize where we've been and where we are now. This first slide is really the same concept. It's just, detailed more. We started with, as staff first, drawing on with pencil and paper, and we decided we need a little more expertise. We hired a architecture firm, Engberg Anderson Architects, and they did some preliminary concepts, and ultimately the concept in the middle is a little more refined, but you can kind of see the progression of one of the concepts from early stages on to what's on the right-hand side of the screen, which is our engineering department, putting some dimensions and measurements to what an actual street would look like. It's putting in the railroad right-of-way, which is a wide right-of-way in this area. It's 100 feet wide, and taking out room for the trail that's already along the riverfront. So, this shows one of the concepts, and again, we were trying to work around 3 proposals, which was really difficult to do. It's been sort of a moving target in this process because the proposals overlapped, and we're working around some constraints, one of them being the railroad, one of them
being a property on the north end that we do not own and also on the south end. So there's, some constraints to the site that kind of limit the possibilities here. And I guess, we wanted to bring it to this committee because we do have the one proposal still out there that we're considering. And, one of the options that was discussed was this option, and it has the road, sort of right down the middle of the property. And when we put measurements and dimensions to it with a 60-foot right-of-way, which is our standard right-of-way, actually is a little less than what we would normally use in most cases. It really, what's left over from the parcels that are quote-unquote riverfront, the ones to the east of this right-of-way, they're kind of narrow and oddly shaped. And I think the concern, I guess, is that, what is the leftover potential of some of these properties? The one on the east side of the street between the street and the railroad tracks is about 100 feet wide. Again, that's working around the constraints, including the dive point, which is on the south end, which the city does not currently own. So, weaving around that property and getting back up on the north side to the property that we own around County Materials, this sort of zigzag pattern and trying to accommodate parcels that are, right on the trail, it sort of leaves some undesirable land for other development, which would basically be between the railroad tracks and a street that would essentially face the back of new development. So I guess that is a concern with that particular design. If we go to the next slide, one of the concepts that the consultants recommended, actually their preferred option, I think if you just click on that one, was to put the street along the river and bring it back down around Dive Point. And I guess, there's a lot of advantages to this that staff sees. Mainly if you just look at this one compared to the first one, the overall shape of the parcel and the size of them. They're all riverfront parcels still. They're not being blocked by private development. There's, public throughway through there, but these are still considered riverfront parcels, except that they're larger and, square and much more developable than the previous ones where there's kind of some remnants almost left over. So I guess just diving into it further, and we're here at ED, we're not at CISM, so we could talk in some detail about some of these things. When we look at street design, some thinking is that, streets aren't just a way to connect from, point A to point B and get between those as fast as possible. Some street designers look at streets as public spaces, and they should be for all users, and again, not just moving traffic as fast as you can. Again, development, you create larger parcels that are riverfront. They're square and overall more usable and higher value overall than some of the other parcels might be. Public benefits, you're really creating a pleasant riverfront drive with views of the river, which we don't really have in many places in Wausau. If you go to the south, there's, a drive along the river, but that's really the only place that we have. And again, the street there creates more access to the river for the public and again, for other land that's in this area. And urban design, with this layout, we have streets or buildings that would face the street and the river versus, if the street was in a different location, you might have two backs. The development would have a back to the street and also a back to the river, rather than it facing the river and the trail, and then the back would be towards the railroad tracks. I mean, there are some ways possibly to mitigate some of those things, but in general,
you know, it's best to be facing the public street, be facing the river, rather than, you know, sort of the backside that doesn't offer much value to the public. So, and if we go one more. So, and some of this is actually outlined in our own urban design standards. We adopted these in 2014. Yeah, go up to that one. So, and they recommend creating scenic drives along edges of the Wisconsin River, and this area is within the riverfront scenic area. Again, place development on only one side of a scenic drive. And it actually does address that double-loaded corridor where if you do that, if you have development on both sides, you create higher value on one side, but then on the other side, it's much less desirable. And in this case particularly, there's really, the shape, the size of the parcels are difficult to work with, plus the fact that it's not really riverfront land anymore. So I guess I just put up a couple examples of places that are doing this. You know, it's not just from a plan that we have. There, thanks. You know, this is, I guess, what I would consider best practices for street design and urban riverfronts. This is Milwaukee, a new neighborhood that's under common ownership, but, you know, all of these would be considered riverfront projects. There is a street between the projects and the river, but it does, you know, does offer that public benefit as well. This is a little bit different scale, larger city still, Minneapolis, where there is a trail, there is a street, there is a residential development that I think if you ask people in this area if they lived on the river, they probably would say yes, even though they're not. Even if they live towards the interior, I think they would probably say that, you know, they live in the riverfront area. And then scaling it down a little bit, this is Eau Claire, and you know, they're redeveloping a whole neighborhood, river frontage, and they're doing, you know, exactly what's talked about in our urban design standards. There's a trail, actually it's much wider, but there's public green space and trails, plus a street that has, you know, decorative pavement and, you know, development that is riverfront, even though it's, you know, not directly on the river, it's across the street from a river. So I think, you know, in an urban context, river frontage is a little bit different than, say, you know, rural lake frontage, where it's, you know, a private lot goes all the way to the water. You know, we don't have that in this case because we already have the trail there, and you know, it's kind of a non-starter to remove that trail. I think we want to keep it there, want to expand it in areas throughout the city. So it's already sort of a different condition than, say, a private lake frontage would be, say, in a suburban or rural area. So I guess considering those things, and again, this specific to this site, and mainly this kind of came out of when we measured and what was left over and how that would impact the future of the other parcels. It's, I think we'd really be limiting ourselves by going with the sort of original concept. And I think we are concerned that, you know, we are giving up a public benefit if we take that street, you know, and put it, say, along the railroad tracks and towards the back of the development. It's not really a riverfront drive anymore. It's just sort of an alley or a street that really has no, you know, interaction with the river at all. It's being blocked by private development. So I guess those are some things to consider when we look at future development in this area. I think we
Sean,
should-
go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Brad. And I just add, the reason this is coming before Economic Development Committee is there was is noted in the packet, there was an RFP that was put out for this area in September 2019. two of the entities that were involved in submitting proposals that were accepted had since backed out, but there is still one developer that is interested in developing in the area. And they've been kind of waiting for this road design, which ultimately will dictate the parcels that will be available for the city to sell on that property. And I do want to just note that if the committee has any questions, that developer, Mr. Felix, is available on WebEx tonight, and then also a couple of his associates, Len Olbrantz from Shear Construction and Jack Parsh from First Weber Real Estate is available as well.
Okay, well, before we get our discussion going, I'd entertain a motion to approve. I have one from
I
Rasmussen.
don't know if it's, are we taking action on this?
Is there no action tonight?
No action, just discussion.
Just a recommendation?
No, I have a comment, I don't have a motion.
Okay. Go ahead, Rasmussen.
Okay, thank you. So in looking at this, knowing that as the economy roars back from the pandemic, we really need to have, I feel like, the infrastructure end of this at least planned and at least designed up to 30% design plans so that development, when it's ready to take flight, doesn't need to wait for us to cut in the infrastructure. I think the new design, as proposed by our engineers, makes sense because it really creates an active public space, which is our goal. But it also, I think, mitigates some of the need for the developments on that side to design their buildings with two fronts, which we found in other riverfront areas really ramps up their cost if they have to essentially build a building with two showcase fronts on it. And so, if we were to, I think, we don't have it as an action item, but I think if we would agree by consensus that we like this revised plan, I don't know that ED even really needs to take a vote per se. If ED agrees that it wants to ask CISM to take up this new design option, CISM can really run with that and work with the engineers to handle the infrastructure part without any action from the development committee, which has already earmarked the area for, at least one new project. So, we could certainly take up that discussion in CISM in January if the committee is in agreement that this new alternative is what we would like to see. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Thank you. One concern I'm having, looking at it right now, and I'll admit, I was more thinking in terms of putting the road along the railroad, the street along the railroad. And then all the yellow areas you see there all being shifted to the west and being very river-centric. Mr. Lentz gives some very compelling comments that make me not so much feel that way anymore. I do have one concern, and not necessarily a solution for it, but down there in the lower left of the new design, we have like a 0.44 acre piece that kind of is the shape of a Hershey kiss. And at that point, we do a little bit of a dog leg and get away from the river. If perhaps right at the tip of that Hershey kiss, if instead of having the dog leg, if we had a left turn lane, if I'm heading south, a left turn perpendicular, and did an angular type thing, then we could marry that Hershey Kiss piece of land with the land right now across the street from it to the east, and that would be a larger lot in itself, and kind of divorce that from the large piece of land, just north of it. That's the only thing. I don't know if we need to meander like that, or if we couldn't stop and turn and then go to, was it Winton there?
Wausau Avenue on the
Wausau,
south.
okay, Wausau Avenue. Might be a way to kind of get more developable interests, because I don't know who might want that 0.44 acre piece to do anything with, other than maybe, put up a popcorn stand. So that was just one area that kind of seemed a little off to me, and I'd welcome any other comments on that, but
I think Lisa might have it.
somebody have their hand up out there?
Oh, I do. I guess I
Okay.
have one comment.
Okay?
I think that this little curve that we see at the bottom of the design, kind of on the south end, will be a traffic calming measure. And I think our goal when we put the street next to the path is to have that traffic not be going through there in a straight line at a higher rate of speed. So I
Yes.
think that little jog that it takes actually has some value. But I think this design also minimizes awkward remnants or parcels in that old design that are too narrow to develop or
Right.
are reduced in value because of their proximity to the tracks
Right.
without enough river frontage. So I think that there's value to that little jog that takes. Now, as far as that awkward little corner piece, I'm not sure what, we would do with that. We can maybe find an alternative use for that, but I think this design does minimize some of that awkwardness of those back parcels that would be remaining on the other design.
Right. Well, what I'm, considering, and from an ED point of view, is that Hershey Kiss, if the street did not, go right, alongside it like that, but just north of the point there, took an immediate left and went basically to the railroad tracks. What we'd be doing is making that piece of land, which is now 2.48 acres, and making it, maybe 2 acres, and then adding that .48 to the .44 and getting a nice size, 1 acre or more separate lot for development purposes. It's just an idea that, because right now, I think that a left-hand turn, like a stop sign and left turn, would be even more calming than this swerve in the road is. So that's just the only thing that's kind of stuck out to me. Do you see any value in having option A and option B to discuss, to share with potential developers? So they might go, I kind of like option B, or I like option A, and not be married to just the one?
I feel like we shouldn't be letting the developer engineer our infrastructure, because if there's conflict between two project owners, we'll never get anywhere. I think we have to manage that infrastructure, and I think we should ask CISM to manage that design process with the engineers so that we have, development-ready sites. But I think if you ask, 3 proposers what they like, what do you do when one of them likes the odd one? So Karma, when we were looking at the gastropub for Karma, they wanted to design the streets around the brew pub, and that didn't sit real well with some of the others that were involved. So I feel like we should manage the street design, we who know infrastructure. And, I think that, CISM obviously would have design and cross-section approval on that section. So if we wanted to change that little jog there, and, make that more of a left turn, we could certainly do that in that committee. I think if we would agree tonight
Yeah.
that we want CISM to start this conversation in January and, kind of get going on some design, that really, I feel, is all we should have to do in this committee.
Right. Well, I would hope that we would get at least, when this goes to CISM, sort of, like I said, option A, option B from ED, expressing what I'm, calling my own concern from an ED standpoint, that we could potentially, that we have that large 2.48 acre piece that's kind of like the shape of a grand piano right now. I mean, I'm being very, descriptive with my stuff tonight. If that was truncated down towards its, southern end, and that piece then was joined to the .44 acre Hershey Kiss, you'd get a whole nother lot, which would be on the south side of a street, essentially, if we just have like a left turn, right there to head towards the tracks and then over to Wausau. And I think from an ED standpoint, you have basically a 2 acre piece, another piece that looks like it could be about 1 acre. And that's, 2 sellable lots versus maybe 1 big sellable lot and one that we'd have to think about what to do with it, which I don't think it would be of much value. So from an ED standpoint, I think that gives us more potential for ROI. Alder Killian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question for Mr. Lenz. Thank you for the info. looking at this, I know some places on the southwest side that are close to the river, there are some kind of floodplain concerns. And in this particular location, as you bring things in closer proximity to the river, is there any type of factor involved that may impact either road construction or, if a road was there, would that be beneficial as a buffer for, say, development on the east? I've never looked at the floodplain here, but was just wondering. Thank you.
No, that's a good question. We do have trails in some areas that are in floodplains, and it is usually a benefit to, not put development right up to the edge in those cases. I think here, I believe it's it's high enough above, the bank is high enough that it's out of the floodplain. I'd have to verify that, but, I think, that could be one benefit of moving it back just slightly. I think it's, if I am recalling, we did some soils testing for the site, and, the ground there is fairly solid, and I believe that it is up out of the floodplain, so I don't think there are those concerns at this particular spot.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else from the committee? Okay, well, I'm also on the SISM committee, and we'll bring, some of these concerns to that discussion as well. So I appreciate everybody's input, and I think we have definite improvement over the bisected kind of creating some weird small parcels. Now we're just kind of left with maybe one weird small one, but maybe that can be dealt with. But okay, send our best to SISM, and we'll see how this goes.
Thank you.
All right, I think we've just got some updates now from Sean.
Yeah, just a couple of items here to update the committee on. The first one has to do with the River Life area and development, and particularly as it pertains to what's called lot number 6, and that is the lot that is along the river, but south of Wausau and immediately above the stream that was there. There had been some question about what commitment there was with that lot to the developers of the River Life apartments, and we had been doing some, the attorney's office had been doing some legwork, I guess, to look back and take a look at what those commitments were from the initial development agreement for the River Life Phase 1 apartments that just opened. And we did provide the developer in late October with a notice that they would, because there's been some other development interest in the property, that they would need to provide a complete plans for construction and going ahead by November 30th. And we did not receive anything further. That letter that had come from the attorney's office had further stated that at that point, Lot 6 would be available for redevelopment consideration from other developers. And as a result, we will likely be coming back in January, approaching this committee about putting out an RFP for that area again, so that the other developers that had an interest in submitting some proposals for that area would have a chance to give that some consideration. So that'll be coming in January. 1300 Cleveland Street, just wanted to update everyone on the progress of the testing out there. The testing from the contractor has been completed. They're apparently in the final stages of preparing their report to the city. I've been told by the city's environmental engineer that it's very likely that we will have a report ready for our January ED committee meeting. So wanted to let you know that that was progressing and to expect some report next month. Lastly, the Thomas Street remnant parcel housing RFP, that's been out for some time now. The RFP deadline is Friday, December 11th, and we will be evaluating the proposals at that point, and again, plan to bring a recommendation on those proposals to the January ED committee. So a lot of activity, a lot of good things happening, and should be a busy month to start off 2021.
Oh, Thank you, Sean. And that concludes our agenda for tonight. I would welcome a motion to adjourn. I have one from Rasmussen and second from Killian. We are adjourned. Thank you.